Welcome to Journey to Esquire, the podcast. I'm Jocelyn Hardrick, founder and president of Diversity Access Pipeline, Inc., the company behind this podcast and other great programs, like Journey to Esquire Scholarship and Leadership Program, which provides $2,000 cash scholarships to third-year law students and internships to second-year law students, along with leadership training and mentors. And Journey to Esquire, the blog, which provides insightful articles to help navigate you through law school and beyond. Find out more on our website, www.journeytoesquire.com. Hi, it's Jocelyn Hardrick. Welcome to Journey to Esquire, the podcast. I'm the founder of Diversity Access Pipeline, Inc., the nonprofit behind Journey to Esquire, the podcast, the blog, and the Scholarship and Leadership Program. I'm excited today. We're doing a board member interview. Today we have Kimberly Lopater. She's an associate attorney at Marshall Dennehy, Warner, Coleman, and Goggin PC, also known as Marshall Dennehy. And she does insurance defense with them and has worked at a different law firm, just started this year. And Kim is motivated and reliable, and she is dedicated to upholding high standards and a positive attitude. She defines the three defining characteristics of her work ethic as perseverance, humility, and integrity. She's also proactive and organized and is passionate and committed to success, and she thrives in an atmosphere where individuals are challenged to reach their full potential. And she's going to talk a little bit today about why she decided to join the board of Diversity Access Pipeline, Inc. to help run the Journey to Esquire programs. But before we get there, we're going to hear about her journey to Esquire. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us. So I'm excited to hear about your journey to Esquire. So what made you decide to go to law school?
I decided to go to law school after I did a gap year when I graduated from my undergraduate program, because I actually decided in my gap year I was going to move out of state. I never really lived in another state or had any experience with anything other than Florida. So I took a job as a compliance analyst, and it was one of those light bulb moments where I realized law school was to do, because I was reading a document for the in-house counsel and I said, what is this weird S squiggly line on the paper I keep seeing? And he laughed. He said, that's for a statute. And it was a click moment of, okay, yes, I need to go beyond this. I'm ready to take the next step. And that really kickstarted everything.
Oh, great. So what was your law school application process like?
Oh, it was interesting. Very strategic, which is very normal for me. I had my charts, my checklists. I was calling all of the schools to see what kind of information I could get, because I had a friend who went to Stetson Law, and it was nice to know at least I have one school here where I have a friend that will be, my mentor through the process. But then I also like the idea of going to a bigger university like the University of Miami. But then I figured, why not just try something crazy and maybe we'll go out of state again. So I applied to Ole Miss and Georgia State University, and I think it was maybe a month after I submitted my applications and I realized I don't want to go out of state. I'm going to practice law in Florida. Why am I applying to these out of state schools? And so I actually accepted my admission to Stetson before I even stepped foot on campus, because of talking to two of my friends who went to Stetson, and they discussed the intimate program that you had at Stetson versus a large university, and the benefits that came with living in the Tampa Bay area versus a larger college town. And that was it. That sold me.
Oh, nice. And then what about the LSAT? What was that like for you?
The LSAT was interesting because, so the first time I took the LSAT, poor planning on my end, I actually got my wisdom teeth out a month before the LSAT. And I had all these complications, so I was only off pain medication for 2 days before the exam. So studying was not the easiest for me. And I also took the exam for the first time on my way to move up to Texas. So we had a U-Haul in the back. I took the exam and then we left. I did okay, but then I decided, okay, let's take this one more time. And so I took it a second time, and I used, I think, only one practice book because I didn't know what else to do. I had no attorneys in my family. I just Googled how to get into law school and I picked the first one that came up.
Oh, wow. So
Yes.
so that's the story of a lot of people who are first generation lawyers. And it's surprising to people that you're going to take the LSAT more than once. It's okay. It's not a big deal if you don't do well the first time. And,
right. And I will say that was a piece of advice that I was given from my friend who went through the law school process, because I told her after my first score that I wasn't happy with it. And I was like, gosh, I'm not going to get into law school. I didn't get like a 175. And she just laughed at me and she said, do you know how many people take the LSAT more than once? It's fine. And especially because I was working full time, I wasn't sure how to balance studying for the LSAT and work and everything else going in life and being homesick. So, it was definitely an interesting process for me, but I think it landed me in the school that I was meant to go to for good reason.
Oh, good. So now talking about the school you went to,
yes.
How was your experience as a law student? Did you enjoy law school, and what did you enjoy the most?
I really did love law school. I think a lot of law students can relate to that time before you enter law school where you start telling people you got into law school and they're like, don't do it. You don't want to be an attorney. It's so exhausting, et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't understand that because the second I stepped foot on campus for orientation, I was like a kid in a candy store. I was like, oh my gosh, I made it. Like everything that I did and happened in my life and that my parents did and, my grandparents, I'm here. And it just felt like such a blessing. I was so grateful. And even though I totally wasn't sold on what I was going to do, I knew that I was at least in the right spot. And I was that person who was knocking on just about everybody's door trying to get mentorship or advice. Sarah, who's also on the board, actually told me, you are very resourceful. She said, I remember talking to you in law school and, we discussed how many people I would go to get advice for externships or summer jobs, because I didn't know that that's what you did during the summer. And even the classes, I became very close with the advisors in career development and student academic success because I learned through the mentors that I had. Your classes don't prepare you for the bar. It's a matter of your responsibility during bar prep, but you can at least take those classes that are bar tested subjects so you have the materials during bar prep or some sort of base knowledge. So I really attribute all that knowledge though to my mentors.
Oh, that's great advice. And I'm a professor, so I tell my students all the time, don't just sit in class, listen to the professor, and then leave. Develop relationships with the professors. Yes. Because although we teach a specific subject, we've done a lot of things, we know a lot of people, and we can give you these kinds of tips if you come to us. And I always encourage them to reach out to academic success or whatever version of that is at your school. When I went to law school in 2009, you didn't even have access to those unless you were like on probation. So law schools law schools are getting much better about making it available to more students. And they are better about preparing students for the bar because, as you know, that July bar was a tough one.
Yes.
And every law school is kind of like, okay, we can't just let the students figure it out. We need to get more involved. Right. So while we're on that topic, any lessons or tips about the bar exam? Because a lot of folks listening in right now have that on their mind.
I was going to say, I would love to take credit for a lot of the advice, but it really was what I received from other friends. I would say the biggest piece of advice that completely changed how I approached my last semester to law school was I had a friend who'd been practicing for about 2 years. And he said, this is going to be the last semester you have before you get into grueling studying day to day. And I realized, honestly, he made it a little more dramatic than it needed to be because I thought that bar prep was going to be a nightmare. It really wasn't. But he said, take it easy. Do not push yourself to try to get, to book every class and get the highest, grades on all of your assignments because your GPA is pretty much stuck where it is right now. and you don't want to burn out before the bar exam or before bar prep. So that was huge for me. And then I had a friend who was very open and candid about his bar experience. It took him quite a few times to pass, and he offered his help, and I was nervous to ask for it because, you know, Stetson had their plan and the bar prep course I chose had their plan, and I was nervous to have another person's input. But he sat down with me and set out a program and said, here's how you use these resources. Here's how you use your course. Here's how you use your bar prep coach. And then get things like the study flashcards, because you know that the way that your brain works is you like categorizing things. And the flashcards are going to be a nice little support system. So if you're tired, you want to walk around, you at least have something so that you feel good while you're studying, or relaxing, that you are still kind of studying and keeping it in your mind. But then also the final thing was, do not look at your notes or do any prep the day before the bar exam. Take the day off. It's not going to just dissolve out of your brain and forget everything. It's not. And thank goodness for that, because I think that was kind of the deep breath and exhale that I needed before the bar exam to put everything into perspective, that this is a very important exam, but life goes on. And you can't make this the most important thing in your life, even though it may feel like it right now. So take the break, relax, and trust yourself.
Yeah, so a lot of your advice sounds like personalize the bar prep, right? Because yes, you have resources, but you have to know what works for you, and that will inform how you use those resources the best way. And then also, it is important, but not life or death. So,
right. It really is. My great grandparent had a family quote that's been passed down. I now have the tattoo on me. It says, "The things you worry about the most never come to pass." And whenever I would get stressed out during the bar exam, my mom said, you know, what did Nana say? What did her Nana say? And I think kind of finding that little piece before the bar exam of, okay, what's going to be the thing that'll bring me back down to earth, help me zoom out and see the big picture of what's going on. Be like, if you don't pass the bar exam the first time, you'll live. I promise. It's been tried and tested.
That's so true. That's a spin on that sounds like a spin on a Mark Twain quote. Like, I lived through horrible things, and some of them actually happened. You know? In our mind, we make these horrible things, and it feels like you lived through it, and you do when it's in your mind. But not everything won't happen. And
it's
so,
true.
Yeah, there's a lot of repeat takers right now trying to figure out what they're going to do next, and I'm just looking for a way to encourage them. So that's good. I know someone who took it 10 times too, and he just kept going. Because if it's what you want to do, you're going to make it happen.
Exactly. And you know what? The partners of my law firm and other firms, and even other mentors who I've spoken to, they look at the fact that if you've taken a few times to pass the bar, that you didn't give up. And they understand things happen, you know, and just because you don't pass the first time, or, you know, you don't have the highest GPA and pass on the first time, that doesn't mean you can't get a job. I mean, especially in Tampa Bay, they're really looking for attorneys, and it's not the end all be all.
Yeah, that's a good lesson. So now you had a great experience. You said you were you had a lot of mentors, and you were first name basis with career services. So what was your first job out of law school, and how did you end up getting it?
Interesting story. I think subjective. So I actually wasn't going to be in Tampa Bay right out of law school. When I was in Texas, I was near the military base, and I had a lot of friends who were in the military, and I had a moment one of the nights we were all together where I kind of felt like I was on the wrong side, that a civilian versus soldier. And the more that I looked into it, I said, oh, I didn't know you could be an attorney for the military and not have to, go through the entire process the same way that, a soldier would with another specialty. So I applied for a position with the Army JAG Corps my last year of law school, and I was accepted. And I was all ready to go into the Army JAG Corps and have that be my life and be a trial attorney in front of some incredibly qualified judges and professionals. And my plan was laid out for that. But I didn't make it through the first step of the physical exam when I had to disclose that I was taking medication for my ADHD. And they told me that I had to go get retested for it to prove that I was what they called worldwide deployable, meaning essentially that I could function if I didn't have my medication and I was in the Middle East or something. And I just had a moment where I thought, I can't do this justification process again. I spent my law school career convincing people that, you know, I do have ADHD, and a lot of people just kind of minimize it. And I didn't want to spend the rest of my career having to discuss that. And that's what it was going to be. So I reached out to an attorney who I worked for when I was a law clerk the summer before my 3L year. I said, hey, do you still have a job opportunity? Maybe, possibly. And he said, what a coincidence. I just got notice from my other appellate attorney that she's moving to Colorado. How do you feel about appellate law? And I'll be completely honest, I had no idea the difference between what I needed to know for the trial level versus appellate. But I know I really enjoyed working with him, and he was, brilliant. So I was like, this is a great chance to work with a great attorney. And so I took it, and I did that for about a year before I got into my annual review and said, I don't know how to do discovery. And it feels very weird hitting this point in my career and not knowing how to do basic motion practice. And that's where I ended up making the transition into the trial level.
Wow, I think that's interesting. And
very
thank you for, yeah, because you do hear about people going into the JAG Corps, but even though there's not as many requirements as if you're enlisted, there's still a lot you have to disclose. There's a lot of physical training. And we've worked with students in the Journey to Esquire program who have joined the JAG Corps. Some have done it on the reserve basis. And it's an undertaking. It really is.
It is. It definitely is. And kudos to all the people who are able to do that, because, I mean, it is a very, very intense and necessary job. But, again, it's a situation where I think everything played out the way that it was supposed to.
Oh, good. Well, and that's brave of you to disclose your ADHD. And so you talked about law school, you've talked about the bar exam and the LSAT. Let's revisit that and how that your ADHD affected that, and what advice you'd have for students who have the same condition and, trying to maximize their opportunities, especially on standardized tests. Yes.
So I wasn't diagnosed actually until I was in undergrad, because my family is very tough and, rub some dirt on it. And I was generally a good student, so I thought that we were okay, just living life this way. But then I had a humbling experience in in undergrad, where a friend said, all these things you do where you interrupt people and you can't read a paragraph without losing track and thinking of 500 things. She's like, those are symptoms of ADHD. So fortunately, I started taking medication for it. And it was funny, the first time that I started studying for the LSAT was the first time that I took my medication. And I read 20 pages straight. And I just started crying in the library. And my roommate, she looks at me and asks if I was okay. And I said, I just read. She's like, what do you mean you just read? You're in college, of course you read. I said, no, you don't understand. I don't remember the last time I was able to make it through 20 pages, through one page, without getting distracted. And in a way, it was also kind of that confidence builder that you now have the tool that can help you. And it's always been inside of you. I think a lot of people with ADHD can relate to that. You know that you're intelligent and you have that inside of you. It's just, how do I get words onto paper in a coherent sentence? So I went on the medication, and of course I ended up doing the best of all of my years of college that last semester when I had it. And I stopped taking the medication when I did my gap year because I was working, and I don't know, it just didn't seem like it was necessary. I was still new to it, and I thought, well, you made it through college, you're fine. But then when I got to law school, I got back on the medication, and I actually submitted an addendum to my law school application because of how low my GPA was when I was applying to colleges. And I explained that I will use accommodations, and if I need to do anything like set up meetings with professors and have that kind of in place my first year, I was open to that. I didn't follow through with that plan my first semester of law school because there was a huge stigma for people who used accommodations. And I thought, well, I've heard it's really difficult to get accommodations on the bar exam, so suck it up, buttercup, just do it. Did not end up well for me. And I actually met with my advisor after I got my first grades back. And she said, "Are you done? Okay, are you ready to accept the fact that there's nothing wrong with you, but you have diagnosed test anxiety, diagnosed ADHD, which are common, to be together?" She said, "There's nothing wrong with accommodations. You told us when you applied that you were going to do it. Let's do it." And it was a little difficult to get those accommodations, knowing that my classmates were going to see that I wasn't in the same room as them anymore. They were going to find out. I did have an unfortunate interaction with one of my classmates after my first exam that I had where I used the accommodations, where I was basically put down for using them. But then I have no problem talking about going to the school counselors. I love them. The fact that you have someone who has to listen to you for 45 minutes, just word vomit. Do it, okay? You're learning more about yourself. You're learning how to interact with people. It is a strength builder over anything. And the school counselor at Stetson was phenomenal and helped me get over that barrier and really gain confidence that this is who you are. This is normal. Take the accommodations. You're probably not even going to know this person 5 years from now. So move on and stop letting other people hinder your ability to succeed. And from that point, I was like, okay, nose down, let's study. And you don't have to talk about your ADHD like it's everything that you are, but also don't be embarrassed of it, because there's nothing wrong with having ADHD and, doing what you need to do so that you can reach your full potential.
That's such great advice on several levels because, I, as a professor, I deal with students with accommodations. I advise students as well, and I tell them the same thing. I also tell students, and I want our audience to know, especially if you're in Florida, or any other state, they probably have something similar. The Florida Legal Assistance Program is open to students. So not only do you have resources within your school, you can go to the Florida bar, go to the Florida Legal Assistance Program for free, confidential. And because some students they're so worried, they don't even want to go to talk to people at the school. Right. And it's confidential in the sense they do not report back to the Florida bar, by the way. So, right. If that's something you're concerned about, then you can look at the information they provided. They'll tell you, what your disclosure requirements are if you need to disclose it. Florida Bar has recently changed some of the questions about disclosure around mental health. So we just want to remind everyone, please get the help you need. Don't let stigma, embarrassment, or fear that you have to disclose it later stop you.
Right.
And then the other part is, you brought up a good point. Like, okay, the Florida Bar, Board of Bar Examiners, they're the ones who do the bar exam.
Yes.
It's a lot harder to get accommodations because they have different standards. Higher ed has federal laws they're following, but the Board of Bar Examiners, that's voluntary. So they don't have to follow the same guidelines. What advice would you have for students who are concerned about transitioning from using accommodations in law school to then having to prepare for the bar exam without accommodations once they get to the bar exam?
I would say practice the pause. I think one thing that I've noticed is common with people who have ADHD is that you also have test anxiety. And when we look at the test for the first time, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't remember anything. And then all those thoughts just kind of pile up and you freeze. And what I found was anytime before I was about to take a practice test and before I took the exam, that when you hear that go and you hear everyone rip open their books and start typing like crazy, I stopped. I put my hand on my tattoo and took a deep breath because I was like, remember that you have your guardian angel with you. And then I started. And it was that forceful pause that really helps with ADHD, because then your brain has the opportunity to say, okay, relax, don't rush everything, go. When it comes to the actual difference between taking the bar exam with accommodations and not, obviously I don't know what it's like because I didn't even apply for the accommodations. It was very interesting because I noticed that I was a lot more calm than my classmates who had never experienced anxiety or stress around exams. And it was not as intimidating to go into the bar exam without accommodations because, and this may sound bad, but the playing field was really leveled because of all the stress and build that everybody else had. You know, the kids who were on the top of the class or the other students who maybe never had to deal with a learning disability. You know, the stress that came with the bar exam, that kind of leveled us out. But also we have experience going to an exam knowing, okay, I may forget everything. I may try to write my acronyms on the paper and it's going to come out wrong, but trust the process and do the work beforehand. It's just like when you go into the practice of law, you have to prepare, and the more prepared you are, the better off you'll be. Prepare for the bar exam, for the material, as much as you prepare mentally, because I think people forget that's also what the bar exam is testing, is how do you do under pressure? And when you go talk to a counselor or you do the research or, you know, whatever it is that you find works for you that you can talk to a doctor about or talk to other friends who have ADHD, and find out different stress management tools and different learning strategies. Like I said, those flashcards are phenomenal for ADHD students. Having some sort of audio recording or something of either you practicing the rules or something, having that as a way to study and prepare for the exam, that's all you doing work beforehand to calm the nerves, to make sure that when you're sitting in the exam, the thoughts are going in the pipeline and down the pipeline, because that's all it is. You know, if I'm sure a lot of people who've been diagnosed can relate to the analogy where it's like, here's your brain, here are the thoughts. You have two pipelines. When you have ADHD, there's a crack in the pipeline. So instead of the thoughts coming in and out and around, there's a crack and they're just going everywhere. But when you practice, you're practicing calming yourself so you can go through that process and just know that not having accommodations doesn't mean that you're going to fail, and not having accommodations doesn't mean you're not going to know what to expect. It's still an exam. You know how exams go. You'll be fine. I promise.
That's what they need to hear, really.
Yeah.
So that's great. Great advice for ADHD, great advice for the bar exam, and studying in law school in general, and asking and getting help. So now we're going to move to, why did you join the board of Diversity Access Pipeline, Inc., and what is it about Journey to Esquire and its programs that appeal to you?
I joined the board because my first introduction to the organization was when I was asked to be a speaker for the writing panel. And it was the first time that, as an attorney, I felt a little bit of responsibility to make sure that whoever I was speaking to, that I was able to kind of be a mentor in a way, even though it was just through a module versus a one-on-one relationship. And as I was preparing for it and thinking in that mentor mindset, I thought, man, I would love to do this as a mentor on the bigger scale, talking one-on-one instead of this group setting. And I knew plenty of the members who were on the board who were either friends of mine or, like I said, Sarah, who already was a mentor of mine turned friend. And I just found such a deep connection to the organization with its emphasis on helping students get from point A to point B with the help of people who understand what your hurdles are going to be, and that it's not going to be impossible when you have your mentors and when you have the resources and the support. Because I think Journey to Esquire really makes sure that, the programming and the modules and everything is focused on, we're not just going to talk to you as another law student or, another person who is interested in becoming a lawyer generally. It is very personalized to, let's make sure that we help you get from point A to point B in the way that you want to. And something that, we've just discussed before in terms of allyship. I've been to so many CLEs where we talk about diversity and inclusion, and you hear about law firms who are like, we have this DIE group and section, and that's it. It's sometimes it can be a tagline. And I kind of was sitting on the panel and thinking, but what does it mean in person? And you can't just sit here and say, oh, well, if I heard someone judging a person based off of their ethnicity, their race, their religion, would you speak up? And you could be that person who speaks up, but is that enough? And to me, the answer was no. And being an ally wasn't just, I will speak up in the room with the partners or another attorney when I hear something that sounds wrong. It's, okay, you need to make active steps. There's so many ways you can get involved to maybe better your career or take another position or something. But is it worth it if at the end of the day you're looking around to your peers and your colleagues and you're in a room full of people who look just like you? I mean, that's not what our world looks like. That's not what the people who we represent look like. And it's time for people to really step up and say that we're not just going to have a DIE committee and we're not just going to say that we are more inclusive. I want to see people take action and have actual constructive steps that they're taking within their firms. And this seemed like the perfect organization, especially in the stage that it's in. I mean, I really do feel so fortunate that the organization isn't, 20 years into the role and I'm trying to figure out my place. I feel like you guys have been so open to my ideas and what I can, potentially help with in the organization, that to me, I was like, let me give whatever I can, but also thank you for listening to maybe what I have from what I've learned.
Oh, you brought such great ideas. We had our first board meeting and we were all like, yeah, someone who loves fundraising.
Yes.
Because obviously we're a nonprofit, so we have to raise funds. And we've been fortunate to have some long-term supporters. We're about to celebrate our 5th year next year. Yes. And we're building up to the 5th year anniversary. We've always had the money for the scholarships, but obviously we want to help more students. We want to be able to hire someone on. And so we're definitely looking for new ways to raise money in a way that's sustainable. So journey@esquire.com if you want to donate and find out how you can help and partner. We're looking for time, talent, and treasure. Had to put that real quick plug in. So any last bit of advice for, people aspiring to be lawyers, new lawyers, law students, college students, and just people interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion generally?
I would say for anyone considering going to law school, call the admissions office and ask if you can get contact information for a student who's willing to talk to you. It's likely going to be the student body president or something. Thanks for tuning in to another great episode. 9 times out of 10, they're going to be so excited that someone wants to talk to them and hear about what it's
subscribe. And for more, visit www.journeytoesquire.com.
My advice to you is don't be afraid to ask for help, even if you don't know exactly what you're looking for. If you graduate law school without having spoken to one person in career development, academic success, and one of your professors who teaches an area you may be interested in, then you're missing out on free resources that you have right there. And for attorneys, specifically for diversity, equity, and inclusion, I would say that I challenge everybody to kind of zoom out and look at the organizations that they're a part of and see if they have something that they're doing that is an active way to increase diversity and inclusion. And if they understand what that actually means, big picture, and if the firms that they work for have a real plan in place, not just a tab on their website to click on to talk about diversity and inclusion, and take a leap of faith and find out how you can make a difference. Because we became lawyers. I think so many people say, I became a lawyer because I want to help people. You're here. What are you doing? Whether it's pro bono or another way of leadership, you can always do something to make the community better. but let's see what we can do to make our community more diverse, because you're missing out on opportunities to hear from some really great different perspectives than what you're used to. And it's time. It's time for us to really use our voices.
Yes, it is. I agree. So that's great advice. Thank you so much for joining us today. And for more information, go to journeytoesquire.com.
Yes.